Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, episode who knows how many, Kyle. We are approaching episode 100 of the podcast. We still got a couple more. We're going to knock that out before the end of the year, but Ronnie Moore here as host, as always, and then my co-host, as usual, my guy Kyle Jessie, holding it down in Birmingham for us. And Kyle, man, we've had a lot of different things happening over the last few weeks. We've just knocked out the Red River Central Open. So now the last two opens, they are the Southern Open finale coming up and the Central Open finale coming up. But this was number two. It's kind of weird to see a full Opens division done like the Northerns were. The Northerns started later than the rest of the divisions, and it ended earlier than all the rest of the divisions. But we just knocked out the Red River Central Open. Keith Poche knocked it out. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that, him making the classic with that, and also some other things that happened along the way. Plus, we're going to preview a little bit about the college bracket coming up this week with the final 8 anglers. The top 4 teams have now split up into individuals. And we'll also have an interview today with Austin Felix, one of the Elite Series champions, former Rookie of the Year on the Bassmaster Elite Series. We'll get to talk to him in just a few minutes. But Kyle, appreciate you joining me for another episode, man. It's fun to catch up and talk, but also the world of fishing, man, what we talked about just a week or so ago, it is totally different from what we just experienced this past week.
Yeah, there's no off season, that's just kind of the way this works. Obviously, it seems like when things are about to start slowing down, more and more stuff happens. And hearing what we're going to do in this episode, I'm starting to think by the time I leave the studio, it might be dark. And it's currently in the afternoon. So I'm looking forward to it, though. Like you said, a lot of exciting things. The college bracket, I know you and I both love the college bracket. Obviously, always gives us some great storylines and always is entertaining the last few days because it's just a straight head-to-head matchup. Obviously, we'll get into that more, but certainly a lot going on with the Opens. Like you mentioned, I got a kick out of that because it was weird watching that Open on the Red River and thinking this late in the year, nearing up on October, that this is probably the last Central, right? And then, nope, we still got another one after this. So, still a lot to be determined, but the classic picture is getting clear. The, qualifying for the elites, guys that have, good chance to do that. Obviously, that's getting a little more clear. It's going to be an interesting few weeks ahead for sure.
Especially with the weather that's going to be rolling through for the college bracket this weekend in South Carolina and the Open the next week in South Carolina. But before we get to that real quick, let's talk about that Open. Keith Poche obviously has kind of made it clear based on the tournaments that he's fished that he is pursuing that Elite Series and that classic bid. He qualified through the Elite Series, getting 3rd place in the Northern Opens points race, which was the James River, Oneida Lake, and the Chesapeake Bay to finish it off. So Keith Poche already accomplished that goal, made the Elite Series via the Northern Opens, but now he's got a couple near close to home where he grew up, I should say, in Louisiana and Texas. He knocks out the Central Open victory there at the Red River. His season's not done though yet. He is still in the hunt for Opens Angler of the Year, Falcon Rods Angler of the Year for the Opens this season. It'll be the last one of those before we switch over to the EQ, the Elite Qualifier kind of distinction that we've talked about for a couple episodes since we had made that announcement. So Keith Poche still has a couple goals. He still has to fish Rayburn to end off the season to make his classic berth actually official, and fishing Hartwell next week. If he does do so, I'm not quite sure. I haven't checked the roster, but I'm assuming he would. He's leading the points. It's an extra 10 grand to his bottom line if he wins Angler of the Year for the Opens. But I would expect nothing less from Keith Poche at the Red River, a place that's got a lot of backwaters, a lot of tight nooks and crannies that you can do, a lot of sandbars that silt in places, a lot of areas that have, those rock jetties and dikes that protect different backwaters. And also you have that Louisiana law where, the private law deal. If you have a house in the back, you can claim that whole creek is yours and you can gate it off. You can do whatever you want. So it makes some of those backwaters tricky, but him and his, off the grid series that he does on YouTube kind of paid right into his hand right there. And he was kind of off the grid into some places that others couldn't fish, and ended up taking the title there for 3 days. He led day 2 and day 3 of that event with Greg Hackney right behind him in the top 5 the entire event. And Greg ended up finishing 2nd place. So good to see some, I guess, Louisiana hammers in different ways. Keith is from Louisiana, now lives in Alabama. Hackney's now in Louisiana, but born in Arkansas. But they're both kind of shallow water Cajun type fishermen. If you had to put a place on the map where they're from, I would probably peg both those guys as kind of that Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi type of angler.
Yeah, and you look at that tournament, and if you'd have told me prior, and I think you'd probably say the same thing, that Greg Hackney and Keith Poche were going to be 1 and 2 in no specific order, you'd be not surprised whatsoever. That certainly played into their hands big time. It was interesting talking to Greg Hackney. I've talked to him about this on 2 separate occasions this year. One for an article that I wrote for Bassmaster magazine, and then one when we were just chit-chatting at the Mississippi River is, he really enjoys those summertime grinder type tournaments where it's really hot, the bite's really tough, but you can still fish shallow in the South. And he mentioned that it's kind of a bummer that we don't get to do that a whole lot, opens, elites, really any events, because a lot of the events go north this time of year, and obviously into August and those kind of things. But definitely was interesting to see him basically go fish that one and do really well. And then Keith Poche, like you were saying, with his aluminum boat and his prowess of trying to get into these tight backwaters, definitely fit his style extremely well. And just overall, certainly not surprised to see either of those guys do well. And then even, Randy Sullivan, of course, same way to East Texan. And then David Gaston, somebody, I feel like we're going to talk about more and more here in my neck of the woods in Sylacauga, Alabama. Coosa River guy, can fish shallow. Really just an interesting tournament overall. And I've really enjoyed seeing the opens field kind of pan out and see where, some of these guys that maybe a lot of guys didn't know prior have really made a name for themselves this year.
Yeah, it only takes a few top 10s to knock that out, and you start to see those familiar names. And David Gaston's one that we covered on Bassmaster Live, the final Northern Open at the Upper Chesapeake. He thought, man, I've kind of ruined it a little bit for myself. Like one event of each division, I kind of haven't done that great, but he had a good start at Ross Barnett, had another great finish at the Red River, one more event for him in the Centrals, and he can get it done. But he's also, I think he's in that overall race as well. And then you obviously look down that top 10 list, and if you don't see an elite angler or an open angler a lot, or a former elite or a future elite, you see a lot of those Thibodeaux and different kinds of last names, and you're like, there's the local advantage that is probably paid off of knowing how to fish in Louisiana, knowing how to fish those. Yeah, exactly. Go Tigers. But I do want to mention, I'm not going to get too deep into this because we don't specifically know all of the details, because we both weren't at the event. We both weren't covering it, but something very interesting that a lot of podcasts, because it's a hot button topic, but the whole discussion of getting into backwaters. If you don't know what we're going to talk about right here, if you look at one of Keith Poche's videos of the final day at that open, he arrives to his spot, and some of the rocks that are kind of like I mentioned, the jetties or the dikes that, kind of, it's the entrance to the creeks. There's always kind of rocks or hard bottom to prevent, erosion. Well, a lot of those rocks had been pushed into the mouth of that, so it'd be difficult to run your boat in there, and you'd bang it up, or it would maybe prevent others from getting in there. Needless to say, Keith, however long it took him to do it, or whatever the case may be, he ended up getting into that area. And one thing that I really realized more so is the rule that I always remember was you cannot push into an area. But Hank Weldon, after he called me, or after we talked, he kind of said the same thing, but he reminded me that it's a different way of pushing. So you can push into an area with a push pole, as long as you don't get out of the boat. Whatever way you can get into an area, you can push and pull into an area, but you cannot get out of the boat. And I remember this, I think, in Florida a few years ago, one of those, a sandbar, a flat in the mouth of one of those springs, an angler got stuck. He got out of the boat and pushed his boat just, a couple more feet and got over it and was good. Well, that was a DQ because he got out of the boat and pushed himself into the area. When you do get out of your boat, for clarification of the rule, when you get out of your boat because you're stuck, you can only push out of the area. You have to basically, like if you're running this way and you get stuck, you have to get out and push backwards and try again, or take a different line, or go faster and try to jump whatever sandbars in your way. So just for clarification, you can push into an area. You cannot get out of the boat to push the boat into an area. So it's I had forgot about it because you don't really see that much. You always see guys pushing off and then going back in. So Poche did it by the letter of the law and wins the event. knocks out a classic berth. Kudos to him. But there were some different interesting things that when we go to Louisiana, you see those. This is my canal. This is my creek. And all I'll say to this, I don't know who may have done it, whether it's a local, whether it was a property owner, whether it was an angler in the tournament. We can't do that in bass fishing. We can't stand for impeding someone else's fishing. That's just not something that we need to stand for in the sport of fishing. If we can do the live scopes, if we can do the shallow water, if we can do all these different types of tournaments and different strategies, there's no purpose in doing that because it only looks bad on the sport. It only looks bad on the angler, whoever did it, that's maybe jealous or frustrated. So that's all I'm going to say about that is no rules were broken. He wins the event. The only rules that might have been broken is impeding. I guess it might not be a rule, but impeding an angler or, being on tournament waters after you're eliminated from the tournament. Who knows? So needless to say, it all works out the way it's supposed to. Poche wins, goes to the Classic now if he fishes one more open, and has now accomplished his elite goal. And so, Kyle, we both like to get skinny, especially when we fish together in Arkansas. We get up into some places we shouldn't. What are your thoughts on that in terms of that's such a fun way of fishing, but also the different obstacles you face, including some people, all it takes is an extra couple inches of debris in the way and you can't access some places.
Yeah, it makes it really tough. And that's, to piggyback off what you said, obviously I feel the same way. I think that if what happened is what they claimed happened and somebody, maybe went out there and added the rocks and added things on there to make it more difficult to get into, like you said, I don't think there's obviously any place in the sport for that. Like you said, just think about if you were in that situation, that would definitely not be an ideal thing. I think he handled it probably better than I would have based on what I saw on social media. I probably would have been a little more upset than that, seems like. But no, like you said, it's definitely a fun way to fish. I think that it's one of those things like, people, you talk about like finding, sneaky holes or like, things off the grid. Sometimes that's a hump in the middle of the lake that nobody's seen or a little drop or something. But a lot of times, like you said, that's getting back away from where other people fish. And that's, something that he obviously loves to do, runs an aluminum boat for that reason. I mean, to be able to get in places that you might not get into with a 22-foot bass boat or 21-foot bass boat or, fiberglass bass boat, obviously is what I mean. But, so yeah, I mean, I love that strategy. You love to see it because it's fun to watch. It's obviously why John Cox has become so popular in a lot of respects because he's just like every other guy. And you hear Keith Poche talk about that a lot with running that boat. Just trying to even prove a point that you don't have to have a $100,000 rig, and things like that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I certainly hated to see that, and I haven't maybe paid as much attention to what people on the outside are saying because I in a lot of respects I don't really care, but
no, it doesn't matter.
I don't really care what people have to say. That if it's not an opinion that I for the most part care about or really is going to make a difference. But that's just getting off on a whole nother topic. But
exactly. There's a lot of voices for sure, and
yeah,
I think that. It's a really cool way of fishing. I don't know if he's going to be able to use that boat. I know he used a different boat when he toured around as a professional this year, and in the opens, he can always opt for a different one. But remember, whatever boat you choose at the beginning of the year for the Elite Series, you have to run that boat or a similar make and model, length and width wise if you do need a replacement boat. So we'll see what his boat for next year ends up being like. Because also it's hard to run an 18-foot boat with a 90, even if it's within legal limits, when you have a St. Clair, St. Lawrence, and a Champlain on the schedule. So we'll see that. But let's transition over before we get our guest, Austin Felix, on the show. I wanted to broach the topic of what's going on this week. There is a small derby with a lot of big implications in the state of South Carolina. We're not talking about the Open that's next week. We're talking about the Strike King Bassmaster College Series Classic bracket. Basically, the top three finishing teams from the national championship at Winyah Bay just earlier in September. Those three teams and the team of the year for the college series, the points race, the AOY, that team, those four teams have now qualified for the College Classic bracket. We get to see it every year in the fall. And we've kind of got, I'll say, a pretty star-studded lineup of anglers that have earned it for their own respect and have a couple different things, in their corner for this event. So They're going to be at Lake Greenwood in just a couple days when this podcast airs. They're going to be Friday is going to be the day where all of them, they break up into individuals. They fish as individuals on Friday to seed themselves. The highest weight will be first seed, lowest weight, 8th seed, everything else there. Then we'll have our matchups for day 2, 3, and 4 of this event. Day 2, it'll be a 4 bracket situation. The 8 anglers split up, they'll be paired up against each other, 4 different matchups, and those anglers will compete. They'll advance to Sunday, where it's going to be the final 4, 2 anglers in 2 different brackets. And then the final day is 1-on-1 on Monday to decide who goes to the Bassmaster Classic and gets entry into all the opens next year, which is now, we have realized after all the changes, the only way you can make the Elite Series from the opens is fishing all 9. So huge token there. Let's go through the couple teams and the anglers that are representing them. First off, let's talk about our team of the year, UNC Charlotte. Louis Minetti, Michael Figaro, those guys from UNC Charlotte right there. Not far from where I grew up. I know those guys. I know at least Louis pretty well. It's cool to see that because they did it in an older rig. We see so many new boats these days, so it's a breath of fresh air to see that. They're from the Carolinas in terms of where they go to school, but they're actually, Louis is from up north based on his last name, Minetti. I mean, he sounds like an Italian if we had to be honest, but Louis and Michael from UNC Charlotte, they were team of the year. Let's go to the national champions who are in that state over at Coastal Carolina. They used their local knowledge at Winyah Bay to their advantage, knocked out a win in the national championship. That's Connor Cartmel and Andrew Vereen. Congratulations to them. They are in the College Classic bracket as well. Then we have the second place finishers in that championship, and that is Jackson Swisher and Seth Slanker from Florida Gateway College. It's going to look a little different in South Carolina than it does in Florida, but they knocked it out at Winyah Bay. They've been good across the college series just to make it there. And also, I will say I've seen Jackson do well in Bassmaster Opens before. So even though he's a college angler and even though he's from a school you may not know, I would watch out for those boys because they definitely know how to catch them with the best of them. And then the last team to make it in is a familiar team to the College Classic bracket, Tyler Christie and Trey Schroeder from McKendree University. It seems like every year we have McKendree represented in some way. Trevor McKinney won the College Classic bracket in 2020 to fish the Ray Roberts 2021 Bassmaster Classic. So congrats to McKendree, Coach John Ridner there, another team making the bracket, and it's Tyler and Trey, and they've been here and done that before, Kyle. And so I feel like when they've gone to the bracket for a second or third time, these guys don't care about second, third, eighth, doesn't matter. They got to win. Otherwise it's a lost cause. And for these guys, they're probably ending their college careers this week. And so the urgency is right there with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such an awesome event because every single time we do this on live, it seems like, at least in my recent memory, it seems like it's always like a photo finish, if that makes sense. Like it's always down to the last, basically the last hour every time when you get down to the final 2. And yeah, definitely some interesting storylines as far as who we've got in the, in the bracket. One thing I did want to mention, I know Christopher Decker will be writing a follow-up story on this, but before the season started, we picked our college prospects.
I want to do that.
If you haven't looked at that, we basically picked, it wasn't a specific number, but it was around 20, 21, 22 guys, teams, before the college season started, and said, these are your guys to watch. These are the teams to watch for this season. And then obviously some of those guys with potential to fish professionally. And out of, if you had to guess, probably 300 and some odd teams that fished in the college series this year, we picked half the bracket in those numbers. So
what was it? Was it McKendree? Was it the McKendree boys? And then it was Jackson Swisher?
Correct. Those two teams were on our prospect list. We obviously whiffed big time with the team of the year with Louis and Michael, but it's all good.
We did pick a
Cinderella story.
I think we picked the Logan Martin winners from Jacksonville State. I think we had Connor DeMauro, who got 4th or 5th in the championship, just barely missing out on the bracket. We had some other teams who popped up there. I can't remember the winners necessarily now.
We had Bo and Jake won Norfolk tournament. We had them. I'm trying to think of the middle tournament or the
Saginaw,
where else do we go? Norman,
Harris Chain, Saginaw.
I'm trying to get my bearings straight, but I think we picked the winners at least in half of those.
Yeah.
So pretty
Kudos
solid
to us. We didn't do terrible.
Yeah, just give us a pat on the back because we were criticized some on that list, but we got most of it right. So we'll give ourselves a little bit of credit there. But no, definitely interesting storylines as far as, like you said, Christy obviously coming back and, fishing it again. That's going to be interesting. I think that, you can look at some examples in the past where coming back, like you said, makes a big difference. Obviously, like Jordan Lee back in the day, obviously doing that and making it. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't really know what to expect from Lake Greenwood, but I certainly expect that these guys are going to put on a show.
Yeah, and they're going to have to adjust every day. And what I love about this, I talked to Hank Weldon before he handed the keys over to Glenn Kale for the college series. So we got to do something, because when we used to do the bracket on the same body of water that the championship was at. It would be the next few days. So it was kind of, if you were first place, you got first seed. That makes sense. But I was like, now that we're doing a different bracket lake than where they qualified from, 1 through 4, that doesn't make sense. Let's seed them based on their actual performance on that lake. And then we saw it last year with some of the top seeded guys ended up making the final day. And so seeing how they're going to fish on Friday, all of them compare their weights, stack them up in an 8-person format, split them up into brackets. We will see if the top seeds advance, because it's going to be a possible tropical storm all weekend. So rain, I asked Brandon Cobb, what's it going to be like? And he just texted back, might have been busy playing some video games. And I wish I was playing with him, but he said it's going to be a mud hole probably. So it's going to be changing every day, and we'll see who advances from that. But Kyle, speaking of college series, let's get a former college angler in this podcast, now turned pro, now turned successful pro, Austin Felix. He's one of the guys that we kind of have dubbed as someone that we need to keep an eye on when they got to the Elite Series, because we knew him from the FLW Tour years ago. We knew him from the College Series. And then also, he wins our Rookie of the Year, and now he is an Elite Series champion. Austin Felix, this is a couple weeks overdue, but I'm glad to be able to get you on the podcast and talk with Kyle and I about your big win at Oahe and even more stuff that we'll cover over the next couple minutes. I can't hear him.
We had nothing on the audio.
Try to mute and unmute. We'll see if it. Nope.
Wait, is that better?
There it is. I see.
Oh, good.
I thought Austin Felix was just super quiet to begin with, but I didn't think he was that quiet, Kyle.
Yeah, that was a little alarming there. But Austin, glad to have you on. How's it going, man?
It's good. It's good. I'm out here sitting in the garage. Hopefully you can hear me now. Just getting ready. I'm gonna roll out to Hartwell tomorrow. I mean, it's gonna be a fun little last event of the year. Just kind of roll down there, hang out with some buddies, and have fun.
So I'll first jump into that, because you're Classic qualified. You won an Elite Series event this year. You live in Minnesota. Why in the world are you going to go down to Hartwell, even though you probably signed up for the other Southerns and you knocked those out this late in the year? What does this do for you? Because you get to just have, I guess, a shot on goal to try to win an event. There's nothing else riding on it for you.
Yeah, I got a bunch of buddies down there. Me and Ronnie know the same sort of people we roll with. Trent down there in Georgia's nearby, a bunch of my other buddies. So I got a place to stay. I get to go hang out one last time. Pheasant season and most of the hunting season haven't really started up yet. So it's kind of my last hurrah to get down there and just have a good time, kind of learn the whole blueback herring deal. Like, I've done it in the spring before, and I fished those lakes in the summer a decent amount, but I've never got to fish an event where they're really like dialed on those cane piles. So it'll just be one more learning experience without too many expenses, and just one last hurrah before the season kind of ends for us.
Austin, you mentioned that hunting season hasn't started yet, but it looks like the weather up there might be about hunting weather based on the way you're dressed. I can't imagine. What is the temperature there today?
Yeah, the highs are in the 50s now. I mean, it's fall season. Water temps are cooling down. Fish are getting fat. I was fishing Mille Lacs last week with a buddy of mine. We had a little team tournament, and they're definitely starting to feed up and get fat up here.
So, like Ronnie mentioned a minute ago, obviously this is well overdue. It's been, I mean, it's been over a month probably, I guess, since you notched your first win on the Elite Series. What's that been like, really, since that tournament happened? And then obviously you had to go back to back with another tournament. But what's that been like since your big win?
It was kind of a blur. I mean, because we were back to back, and it's been said to death that the guy that wins the first back to back, it kind of just doesn't get shuffled aside. I got tons of congratulations from all the anglers and just from a lot of people, but in my mind, it just kind of had to flip the switch and almost forget about it, because we had almost no time to sit back and enjoy it. And because of that, I had to push a lot of podcasts, a lot of other things just to the wayside to make sure that we did our job on lacrosse. Since then, I've talked with a few people, and obviously I've been kind of hitting a little harder on the sponsor side, just making sure, hey, you guys remember that before lacrosse, I did pretty good. So it was that kind of deal, but I stare at the trophy every day. It's in my room, but other than that, like it's kind of same as usual, just keep on rolling. And I really want another one. Once you do it once, you get a craving for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of life goes on. You're a tournament fisherman, so you're going to get humbled pretty quickly because there's no way you're going to win every event after that. But it does make you can go out to dinner and take your girl out a couple more times, not have to worry about checking the bank account. You got plenty of money in there for that. You know, you got this or that taken care of. But for you, Austin, we got to see something, and I wish we could do the podcast back to back and, you know, in the middle of events, but you guys have to practice. We have to cover the tournament. But it was great to see your emotion. If that's the last impression we get of you, because we're going into the Mississippi River, your celebration on stage for the Sleepy Assassin as your nickname. You're pretty mellow, you know, you don't get too high, don't get too low. It was very, very cool to see your, your celebration, your excitement that, hey, I just did something probably that I've always wanted to do. No matter where I'm fishing professionally, it just means something to me to accomplish this. Is that what was going through your head, or is this something that you've just been working on, or maybe you circled Oahe and was like, I want to win this one, or this is going to be a great chance, or what has that been like for your mind leading into that event, and then now seeing you get the victory afterwards?
I knew Oahe was probably the one I had the best opportunity of winning, just because it's a smallmouth tournament. Not a lot is known about it, so we're at more of a even field for the whole rest of the team. But yeah, as far as the excitement, I mean, it sort of just was almost a release of 4 days of like nervous energy building up. And it even happened on the water once. I ended up like yelling, just because like it just builds up inside you and you just have to like get it out at the same time. But usually I try to internalize that as much as I can and try to stay on task and stay focused on what I'm doing. But yeah, once it was all said and done with, like, I don't know, it was one of those things, like I just screamed out loud, just did it like it wasn't something I thought about, or this is how I'm going to react when it happens. It's just friggin' a wave of emotion and just like trying to get all that extra energy out and all just the excitement in general.
Now, Austin, I just thought about this. Were you one of the guys that did you go pre-practice in the pre-practice period at Oahe?
Yeah, me and Brian Schmidt drove out there for 4 days to pre-practice, and
in 2021.
Yeah, it was right after it was announced, so we were able to get out there like at the same dates last year as we were going to be there this year, which I thought was going to be awesome. Usually you can't do that. Usually you show up winter or early spring for a summer event or something like that. But we were able to get out there, see what the fish like to do, see how the lake laid out, and it was some of the best fishing I've ever seen in my entire life, like smallmouth fishing. And I've been to Mille Lacs before everybody knew about it, and it was incredible. I've been to Thousand Islands 10 years ago when it was mind-boggling, and this was right there with it. The size wasn't quite there, but the way that the fish reacted to bait was ridiculous. You catch one and 10 would follow it to the boat. They'd sit under the boat, and if you wanted to, you could catch all 10 of them.
Now, that was what kind of the point I wanted to get to, was that it seemed like most guys that pre-practice, granted, there was a definite correlation with those guys doing well in the tournament, but you heard so many of those reports exactly like you said, that guys were just smashing them in pre-practice. And then during the tournament, it was completely different. The fish acted different. Obviously, the water was further down. I mean, talk a little bit about the differences between, when it was super good when you pre-practiced, and then the adjustments you had to make during the tournament to get your first win.
Yeah, that first morning of official practice, I basically I knew what section of the lake I wanted to be in. There seemed to be like a 15 to 20 mile section from about a couple miles below the bridge to 10, 15 miles above it. And that definitely had the bigger size fish. In pre-practice, you could catch 17 pounds, 18 pounds anywhere. But when you got into like a 5 or 6 mile stretch, all of a sudden, all those 3 to 3.5 pound fish turned into 4 to 4.5 pounders. And the big ones were 5 to 6. And so I knew the section I wanted to be in, at least for the first day. I ended up spending all 3 days of practice in that same section. I ended up fishing the tournament just because it seemed like the quality was bigger, even though the size of the fish and the whole chain in general had definitely shrunk. There were a lot more skinny fish. There wasn't quite as much bait. And there weren't as big a groups of fish. They kind of broken up. They were kind of twosy, threesy kind of deals instead of those big groups. I think a lot of that mainly had to do with water level. We were catching them in 20 to 30 foot last year when we were pre-practicing. And with the extra 5 foot of water gone out of that, it pushed them all out a little farther. And there's not quite as much like really good cover that much further out. A lot of the rocky breaks and like the clumpy boulder stuff and the trees were now up in a lot shallower water. And the other thing was, I feel like just the lack of water there pushed the bait fish further south faster. I was told last year, like I learned just like researching it, that there was a definite bait migration. It runs up the river in the spring and summer, and it makes its way down to the dam for fall and winter, and it just kind of makes that. So last year, I think we hit it perfectly. All that bait was still above the bridge, whereas this year, I think they were cruising south faster. And I talked to Brian Schmidt, who spent a day and a half way down where you would have to get gas essentially. And he said that's where all the bait is at that point. And that kind of confirmed what we had thought. The problem was the average size fish down there was not nearly as big as the fish in the middle section.
Like, yeah, we were a little early for the bait, or we were a little late for the bait to be mid-lake, but we were a little early for the big fish to be down south. So that makes sense. They were not connected to each other. But one thing you guys always talked about is these fish don't get fished for that much. Yes, there are smallmouth anglers around there, but a lot of it is walleye fishing. These fish don't get pressured. So when you do catch one, you can maybe catch 20 of them off a spot because they all are just so curious and they come around. You can drop right back on them, or they go back to where they were and you can find them on Live Scope or whatever electronics you're using, Active Target, Mega Live. But how quickly did those fish that don't get pressured, how quick did they get smart? Because I feel like Guntersville bass should be lockjaw all year long if they got pressured and they knew there was baits around that weren't natural. For these fish to never see baits, to see them for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden it just got so tough. Do you think that was a pressure thing, or do you think that was just the weather changes you guys had?
No, it was totally pressure related. And it took them one tournament day to switch off of that drop shot, essentially. That's how I caught him in practice. That's how I was getting all my bites. That's how I caught him first day of the tournament. But you could tell very quickly that they got off of it. Fortunately, I was able to switch over to a Ned rig and to that Carolina rig and get a few to commit that way. But it turned into the same thing as St. Lawrence, anywhere else. If you saw a group, you could hopefully get one to bite if you could put it on them right away before they knew you were there. But after that, they were educated. Even that the spot I made a lot of my late day culls on day 3 and 4, I had that point all to myself. And you see day 4, I pulled up to it. And when I caught that first really good one, there was a pack of probably 20 smallmouth swimming around that point, which is maybe the size of a football field. And the first time I see them, they swim underneath my boat. So I reeled in my bait and dropped it on real quick and caught that first good one. Well, that same group of fish would swim away out of active target distance and come back through. I saw the same group maybe 6 times over that 2 hours, where they'd swim back through and they'd swim around and sit underneath my boat for a second and they'd take off again. And I put a different bait on them every time, and I never got another one of those fish to bite. And that's on a spot that I'm 99% sure I had totally to myself that whole event. But it's just like, that's how quickly they were switched off from all the pressure that we were getting there.
Have you, before we maybe dive into some more specifics, have you ever seen a smallmouth body of water where they were that skittish or educated, where they would just be pelagic swimmers? Yes, the mantra is smallmouth are here one day, gone the next. You know, you can't count on them to stay in the same spot. But it seems like they were so much more pelagic, almost like they were blueback herring eaters, like spotted bass are, where they're just swimming all over the place. I've never seen that in a tournament that we've covered. Have you seen any other smallmouth lakes that somewhat replicate how much they moved?
The only thing you can really kind of compare it to is the Great Lakes sometimes, like wind switches or just bait leave the area and fish will just completely leave. I've seen it at Thousand Islands, at St. Lawrence, when you get on groups of fish that are really pressured, whether they're in the lake or just in community hole areas out on Lake Ontario, where you can get one. It's not uncommon to kind of do that sort of deal, but how quickly they switched from feeders to really pressured fish is something I really hadn't come across. It was, I expected to come to that tournament and I didn't think we'd hit 100 pounds, but I expected it to be 90. Like of the 4 days I pre-practiced there, I broke 25 pounds from a best 5 2 of the 4 days, the 2 days that I was in the correct section of the lake. And I caught, my biggest one was 6 1/4. So it was like, they're there and they're huge. It's just, yeah, like you found out in a hurry in practice that they had switched up and it wasn't going to be what everybody thought it was going to be, but it was still an awesome event. I really want to come back there.
So Austin, you did talk a little bit about baits. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Obviously, you know, the way that these smallmouth acted, it was interesting to see that more baits than a normal smallmouth tournament came to play. One, just give us your entire lineup of baits. And then 2, why do you think this tournament, based on, you know, compared to maybe a St. Lawrence or places where a drop shot's just king and that's it, why do you think it was, you know, guys were able to throw different baits, you know, for these smallmouth versus some of the other ones we've seen in the past?
Yeah, so I threw a drop shot, a Ned rig, and a Carolina rig, caught every single bass of that tournament for me. The baits on the drop shot kind of depends. I had 3 or 4 rigged up, and I have a 3.6 flatworm, a 4 1/4 flatworm, and then like a general, just a bunch of different max scent baits, some shad patter, some green pumpkin. And it was almost like big game hunting. You'd throw one at it, and if you didn't eat it, reel it back in to throw a different color bait. I was also running really heavy drop shot weights. I was running a 3/4 ounce drop shot weight, just because when you get that deep, even a 1/2 ounce weight still takes 3-4 seconds to fall. And then if you want to wacky rig one of these, there's so much extra drag from it being wacky rigged. It can take a while, and those fish were moving so quickly that you really needed a heavy weight. So basically I just throw at them, give them one cast. If they acknowledged it, then you know they were smallmouth. And as long as they'd stay on the bait on the bottom, I'd keep it there until they made their decision to leave. Or at that point I reel up, switch baits, throw at them again if they didn't need it. But that was day 1, and that was practice, and that was pre-practice. That was basically all we had to do. And the second day of the tournament,
But you're glad that we went when it was windy. You're glad that we decided to go because that was your biggest weight day.
In hindsight, absolutely. I was really late to weigh in. I think I was the last person to weigh in day one. And I was like, if we don't go, I'm not going to be mad at you guys. Cause like, it looked like it was going to be rough, and it was rough that first day. And I did most of my damage before the wind picked up, but I was fortunate to get in an area that you could fish and put a huge bag together. But that day it's one of those days that you hear when somebody wins an event where just like everything goes right. Like I caught 10 pounds of bass on my first 2 drops. And from there, it was just like keep calling up till I had one under 4 pounds at 11 o'clock. And I had 22 and a half pounds. And Lee had almost 20, and he said he's going to the scales. And I'm like, all right, I'll be right behind you. But I decided to stop on a random point halfway back because it was out of the wind. Never fished it before. Nobody's on it. And I just started scoping around and saw one boulder in 20 foot of water. Didn't see a fish on it and just threw at it and catch a 4.5 to call it a 3.5. And like pushed me over 23. And I'm like, that's the kind of stuff you're like, all right, it's kind of meant to be. And but yeah, now I feel like I've gotten really off topic. And what were we trying to talk about?
I interrupted you there, but I knew that was a crucial day. But you mentioned that practice, the drop shot was the deal. You went up in the heavier weight to just pick at these fish. But once you got to the tournament, I think you're about to mention either the Ned rig or the Carolina rigs started to take over.
Yeah, the Ned rig switched up for the pelagic fish when I was kind of hunting them down, the ones that wouldn't stop moving. That became a Ned rig, and it was a 3/8 ounce tungsten, Swagger tungsten Ned rig with just a big TRD. I cut maybe a 1/2 inch off of it, so it's not the full 4 inches. It was maybe 3.5. But it seemed like day 2, once I started fishing that, you could get more of them to commit to it. They'd all follow your every bait you throw at them. They follow down and kind of give her a look or two, but the drop shot definitely disappeared. And then it was the Ned rig, and they'd stay on it. And as long as you kept it down there, eventually they'd pick it up and swim off with it. But that was the pelagic ones. I had a couple of areas, not many, but there were a couple where you could definitely tell that the fish were set up on something specific, like a rock pile or a hard spot, or like just an end of a point where like that was their home little area, and they weren't really leaving and they weren't really swimming around. And that's when the Carolina rig came into play, because you could sit off of it 100 feet and just bomb it over there. It was still, the bait is essentially still weightless, so it was giving it a really free flowing, like natural presentation, but you could fish it in the wind. You could get long casts, and you could get a hook in those fish and pretty much get them in the boat at that point. And that was a huge player on day 2 and day 3. And yeah, Livesey kind of turned me on to it. I had one rigged up. I knew that the guys had caught him there in the past when we were there, but I hadn't thrown it much in practice. And after we both had good bags in the morning, but after they kind of turned off of the drop shot in the Ned rig day 2, he pulled it out and basically said, I caught a few good ones on this late in the day. And first or second cast, he bows up, and I'm like, all right, freaking dug into the box, yanked it out quick.
Get the line out. let me rig up a Carolina rig, because they're so quick to rig up, right?
Oh yeah, I had it all rigged and ready to go. Like all I had to do is pull it out and freaking bombed it out there. Had the same bait tied on as he did already, and it was just kind of, we were having so much fun up there. And Lee even said, it was like, dude, how can you get mad at this point? Bob Downey was 200 yards away, and you could tell he was watching us, but every time we look over, he'd be catching one. Well, he like slowly eases his way over to us, and we're like, what's going on, Bob? He said he only had 4 rats. And we're like, well, freaking come on, let's chill. And he slid up right next to us and ended up catching his 5th keeper, and everybody just laughing, having a good time. And then Lee left. Josh Douglas, who had fished that same spot the first day and got a good bag, he slid in. And at that point we had our bags and I'm like, dude, they're here. So I left at that point too. And that's when me and League basically like called it a day and let them have it. It sounds like it was kind of beat up at that point because I think Josh only caught 1 or 2 off of it after that. But it was, yeah, it was one of those fun days where you dream of having.
Kyle, I want to say that Austin and I have chirped each other back and forth in DMs over the years, even before he fished on the Elite Series, when he was threatening to wear pajamas on the stage. And I said, Trip Weldon will kick you off the stage. You got to figure out a way to wear your pajama pattern without it being pajama pants. It goes all back to that. And he created one of the most unique ways. But needless to say, I don't know if Austin's going to respond to my texts anymore, because he checked in on day 2. And I said, I had seen Lee's Marshall sending in a blog that's like, Austin Felix is on his way to 20 pounds. Austin Felix is on his way. So I texted Austin and said, when you check in, like, how much do you have? And he said 23. So what did I do, Kyle? I put it in Bass Track as 23. And he's like, how the heck did they know that I had 23? And then he connected the dots that I had relayed that. So Kyle, I might have to have you text him from now on, because he's onto my ways. That it's all going to our bottom line of our info. But Austin, fantastic day 2 there, biggest weight of the tournament for that day. It ends up leading you to, making the top 10 cut, and then obviously winning the event. For you, where do you put yourself? Because this is a question, and this is a graphic that we made and we posed up on social media after that. Where would you put yourself in the hierarchy of smallmouth Mount Rushmore? Because I went down and I selected, I'll tell anybody, I put the faces up there. I said, these are the guys that we're going to make them choose between, because the resumes of all 6 or 7 of those guys, it is astounding. And for you, I don't think you've ever finished outside the top 25 in an all smallmouth event. And I even count Champlain because I don't know what people are fishing, but never outside the top 25 since you've been on the Elite. So do you feel like you belong on the Mount Rushmore of smallmouth anglers?
I like to think so. Yeah. I'm excited every time there is a smallmouth event. There's a handful of guys that are next level smallmouth fishermen. I think I'm right there with them. A lot of it comes down to previous experience and stuff. Obviously, the Johnstons are incredible everywhere, but you get them on the St. Lawrence, and well, I guess you can count them on as a second place finish at this point. But they're just amazing. What Taku's done in the 3 or 4 years he's learned how to smallmouth fish is incredible. And then you've got a lot of the northern guys I grew up fishing with and against Seth, so I know everything, all the ability he has to smallmouth fish. We've seen him win a lot of those late season championship tournaments. But there's probably like 8 or 10 guys that I feel like at any given smallmouth tournament, if we were to put everybody on a smallmouth lake that nobody's seen before, it would be a toss-up. But I think I'd be one of the 8 or 10 guys.
I like the confidence, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Austin, before you jumped on here, we were talking a little bit about the college bracket, which made me kind of want to ask you a question about that. Obviously, you fished at the University of Minnesota. Go Gophers. And
they look good on the football field too.
Yeah, I don't know how much you pay attention to football, but what's going on there? I was going to ask you about that as it was, but we can maybe get to that here in a minute. What's your journey been like? Obviously, fishing in college, making it to the Elite Series, winning a tournament, your second year in, winning Rookie of the Year. Just give me an idea of what that journey has looked like for you, and then maybe for a college kid that's currently fishing right now, kind of maybe some advice that you would have to try to make this, quote unquote dream a reality.
Oh yeah. My college tournament career started really late and it was really short. After high school, I went to 1-year community college. I did all right. I wasn't really motivated to be there. So I told my parents I wasn't really motivated to be there and took a year off. That turned into like 3 or 4 years. But I basically fished and hunted all the time and worked as a tire tech at Discount Tire when I had to. But I felt like that was kind of my education, just fishing nonstop every day. And when I finally went back part-time and then went back to school full-time, transferred to the University of Minnesota, and really only got to fish college for 1 year. But it was invaluable. Like, college fishing really opened my eyes to the fact that traveling while tournament fishing wouldn't be impossible. I really thought that you had to have as much local knowledge on every lake you go to as you do when you're fishing team tournaments. Most guys know if you're fishing against locals on team tournaments, you have to have every little sneak hole. You have to know every special color and presentation just to compete a lot of times. That's the way it was on Minnetonka, on Mille Lacs around here. So when I finally started traveling and realized, okay, it's not about that. It's about patterns. It's about regional patterns. It's about time of year and just that kind of deal. I realized that I could compete without all this knowledge. And that really opened my eyes. Being able to win the FLW College National Championship kind of gave me the motivation to try to go pro and just see how it worked. And
you got to fish the Forrest Wood Cup, right? After winning that?
Yeah, I got to fish that. It wasn't great. I think I caught 3 fish both days or something like that the first time I went there.
Was that Ouachita? I mean, that's fine.
That was on Murray.
Oh, Murray. Okay.
Out of the summer. And then the first year I qualified after fishing the FLW Tour, we were back on Murray and I ended up finishing like 11th or 12th. So I definitely learned a lot at that point. But college fishing grew a lot of my contacts and a lot of my close personal friends right now, to the point where I fish with so many different regional guides that I've got to learn how everybody does it everywhere. Like, I got really close friends in Louisiana that never fish below knee deep. I got really good friends out on Lanier and really good friends in Florida. So when you grow those relationships, it helps grow you as an angler. And like, that's the one thing I would tell young anglers now, is to fish with as many people as you want or as you can. Figure out what you're not good at and what you don't like, and find somebody who loves that and go fish with them, because building your confidence in everything is the biggest way, or the fastest way, to become like a well-rounded angler. And then you'd be able to, like, because that's what you have to be at this point. If you want to fish 9 open tournaments and qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series, you're going to have to be a well-rounded angler. You can't fish 4 foot deep all the time, and you can't stare at your active target all the time. It's going to take somebody who can do it all.
That's fantastic. I wanted to ask this while we were talking about Oahe, but you just mentioned it. What is active target? What has forward-facing sonar taught you? If you knew a lot about smallmouth before that, or even patterns of fish and the way they relate to things, what kind of instant information has that given you, where you mentioned a school of fish swims off, hundreds of yards away and comes back through, and you can see them and know that it's the same group of fish? Back in the day, we would be like, oh, there's a couple groups of fish that come through random times. No, it's the same group, or they're in this depth, or they don't like this color, but when I drop this color, they do it. What are some of those things? How has that opened up your brain on approaching spots? And would you fish differently now that you've used it if you had it taken away? Like if you pulled up to a spot, understanding there's probably a lot more fish there than you think.
Yeah, it's completely opened my eyes to fish movement, not just smallmouth, but largemouth as well. The number of fish that'll look at your bait every cast and just not eat is mind-blowing. The craziest thing, the first year I had my rookie year at Santee Cooper, that first day I had a really good bag. And this is largemouth fishing. I was fishing docks, and I'd power pole down 40 feet away from a dock, and I could watch the fish underneath there, and there'd be 4 or 5 of them. And I fished a lot of docks back home, and I was always that guy. You'd go down and you put one bait in the heart of the dock. If you didn't bit, okay, there's not a fish there. But after freaking one day of that on Santee Cooper, watching 5 or 6 fish swim from one post to the other post and just like continuously moving around. Like it was mind-boggling. Like you chase them. I'd make 8 casts and throw at one post and they move over to the other one. You throw at the next post. The number of casts you have to make at any given piece of structure and the amount these fish move around is mind-blowing compared to what I thought it was. Like I thought you pull up to a rock pile, they're sitting on a rock pile. The other thing that really opened my eyes to is how far a fish will come to a bait if it really wants to eat it. At Champlain, I watched fish eat that spy bait on those cables, come out of, I was looking down 40 feet and they'd come out of the bottom of it and come all the way up 50 feet to eat that spy bait that I was winding 6 feet under the surface. And it's just, it's an incredible tool. Like it definitely can screw you up. And if you let it, it can slow you down way too much if you let it. If you start trying to chase fish that aren't going to bite, they're not going to bite. Whether you have active target, whether you put it 4 inches in front of their nose, they're not going to bite. So it's something you have to learn how to use. You have to learn how to pull the plug with, but it's I'll never not have one on my boat at this point.
Austin, kind of getting back to a topic we talked a little bit about earlier with pre-practice. For the tournaments on the 2023 schedule, any of those you looking forward to pre-practicing? Or are you going to pre-practice any of them? And then if you had to pick a tournament on the schedule that people may not think that you're excited for, that you are, give me that tournament.
I'm not sure what I'm going to pre-practice. I'm going to stop by Knoxville on the way home from Hartwell just to mess around there for a few days. I don't know if it'll help or not. We're going there later than we were a couple of years ago, so depending on the weather, they might be more up shallow, and that whole mope gussy deal might not be the deal. But I'm gonna go keep it honest and kind of just look around. Obviously, I'm really excited for the last 3 events of the tournament, being that they're smallmouth events.
See, now that's kind of what I meant. Like those are maybe the tournaments somebody would expect you to be excited about, but like surely one of these newer lakes on the schedule you're excited about.
And I'll say them out loud for those who are wondering. The 3 he's mentioning is St. Clair, St. Lawrence, and Champlain. The others on the schedule is Okeechobee, Seminole. We have Murray and Santee Cooper, Lay Lake, Sabine River. I think those are the 6. And then we have the 3 northern ones.
I mean, the one that's probably most likely I do well is Murray. It's more of a clear deal, spotted bass deal. Actually, it's more largemouth, but pelagic.
They act like spotted bass, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, Florida lakes are always scary. I think unless you live down there, you're never like, this is going to be my jam. I like fishing Okeechobee. I'm really good buddies with the McMillans, and I've gotten on there and fished with them before, and I can catch them good when we're just fun fishing. But I also have my 2 worst FLW finishes on Lake Okeechobee. So it's just Seminole could be fun. It really depends on the weather. If it starts warming up and the fish are pulling up, that's going to surprise a lot of people. It's going to be an awesome tournament. As far as the other ones, I don't know. I would have to say Murray is probably the one I'm looking for most of. Then maybe one of the Florida events.
Are you not looking for the Sabine? I mean, are you kidding me?
I don't know, dude. In June, it's gonna be 1,000 degrees.
But it's fun. I will say, you weren't on the Elite Series at that time, but we did a June Sabine River, and it was in 2018. Hackney won that one. And it was, I will say, I feel like the Sabine, the weights aren't much different in April versus in June, but there's more fish biting across the whole place, I feel, in June, because there's not a cold front. They weren't in the back of a canal. And so maybe we won't see tight quarters fishing as much. We'll see some other areas come into play. It's different every time we get there, but I had to rag on you because you do know those Louisiana guys, and they probably are probably more comfortable with the Sabine than you would be. But I got 2 things. One, I think I have one small question I was just about to ask. I might have just forgot it, but I'll go ahead and ask the one I was going to end the show with you. We always talk about the business side of the sport. Everybody wants to talk about how to get sponsors. You mentioned it off the top about after winning an event, it makes those conversations a little bit easier. But you are who you are. You're going to be a quieter guy. You reserve yourself. You're not going to be flamboyant. For those people who are just like Austin Felix, there are a lot on the Elite Series like that. There's a lot at the local level. There's a lot of people that are going to come up and qualify for the Elites one day that have that same personality and mindset. They're quieter, they're more reserved. How do you go about marketing yourself? Because a lot of people these days talk about, I got to make a bunch of YouTube videos. I got to be flamboyant. When I catch a 10-pounder, I better boat flip it and scream really loud so that people know that I'm a good fisherman to get the money that they're maybe doing. Like there's all kinds of different ways people will do it to get attention. I want to talk well. I want to do this well. I just want to let my fishing do the talking, whatever. For you as a more reserved, quiet angler, how have you broached those conversations with sponsors to where they know that there's value with you that isn't maybe as seen as other people's value that we know about or we notice?
I mean, it's a really slow process for me. Building relationships with individuals before even approaching the whole sponsorship deal. I mean, I might have gotten one sponsorship like opportunity through my career, just cold calling or cold emailing people without either having people who know that individual personally or knowing them personally and like growing a relationship and like into something that they want to be a part of and they want me to be a part of. And that's the best way I've done it. A lot of that is college fishing relationships that have grown. Other ones are just other tournament anglers becoming friends with and them introducing you to people. And that's the best way I've figured out how to do it. The whole YouTube or social media deal, I tried to do it somewhat. I'm really inconsistent about it. I always feel like it has to be really cool if I want to put it, or like really funny or something if I want to put it on social media. And that's a mistake on my part because I really feel like you should almost just flood it. But
and people who follow you or people who know you, they don't expect to come to your channel and see you with your shirt off and swinging it above your head or something. They come because, you know, they follow you because they know who you are and they know what to expect. You know, they just want to see it.
Right. Yeah. But that's the best way I could tell somebody is it's not going to be a fast process. It's slow, methodical, make a few good connections with a few companies that you like and just grow with them, hopefully, and you can turn it into something. Like the sponsors that I do have now take really good care of me. And I think it's because they know I've been around, I've been with them for a long time, and I'm not going to do something crazy.
Kyle, do you have anything for Austin before we let him go?
No, I was just gonna say, if you do ever decide to take your shirt off and swing it around in the air on your social media, do give us a heads up.
Yes.
We would love to see that and love to share it. But no, I really enjoyed having Austin on and getting to hear more about the win, and then obviously some things on top of that. Look at that superstar,
the newest cover boy of Bass Times. I know you just posted about that. That's got to be something cool. I think this was the question I was going to ask you before I forgot it. What's that like? Have you ever been on the cover of a magazine or on Bassmaster? And has that been something that, I mean, is this right beside your trophy now? Because that's got to be pretty cool.
I mean, I haven't got the magazine yet.
Oh, I got it early then.
Mandy emails us if we have any mentions in the magazine in case we want an extra copy or two. So I told her to send me a couple extra copies. I'll probably have to get one framed or something. 47. It's definitely the first time. Yeah, it's definitely the first time I've been on any sort of cover or anything like that. So it's pretty special. It's a really cool deal. I mean, like, it's just one more awesome like perk of winning that event, I guess. It's just hopefully the career keeps growing and to the point where I can get on a few more, win a few more blue trophies, and just like create a lifelong career.
If I was a betting man, I'd say before too long, not only will you have a trophy collection, you'll even have a cover collection where you keep all your covers as well.
I hope you're right.
Well, Austin, hey, we asked you for 20 or 30 minutes and we took 45 to an hour. We appreciate you talking with us, man. I'm glad that we actually did get delayed on this because we had so many events in a row and we got to take a little bit of, I guess, we get to think back to Oahe. You get to kind of run it back through your head again. I know you've been going through podcast gauntlets the last couple of weeks. So glad we were able to make this happen. Appreciate you making the time before you head to Hartwell. Hartwell might have some magic in store for you because you did just win the college championship, just a dam above where you're at Lake Oahe. So Austin, we appreciate you, and we will chat with you in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, maybe on Bassmaster Live at the Open at Hartwell. Who knows? I'll be doing that live with Jason Christie as my guest commentator. So don't show too many secrets.
I hope so. I don't think he needs any of my secrets.
Awesome.
You got a class.
Awesome, Austin. Well, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Anytime, guys.
Austin Felix joining us on the podcast, Kyle. Super cool to get to talk to him. He's quiet, but I kind of know Austin's sense of humor and his personality, and we need guys like that. We don't need a bunch of Ronnie Moores that just talk all the time. We need the guys that when they do speak up, it's for a good reason, and super cool to see him. I know I put him on my fantasy team for Oahe, so I was very pleased that he won that, but it definitely felt like an Austin Felix. If you're going to live scope out, or active target out in the middle of a lake for smallmouth, he's going to use a lot of tricks of the trade. And that 3/4 ounce weight for his drop shot to get to the fish quicker is something that you shot as a tackle tip for me and sent it my way for bassmaster.com. But it's something that I don't think a lot of people did, but I think they're going to have to experiment with that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that Austin's not on here with us anymore, it's definitely worth bringing up the smallmouth Mount Rushmore conversation some more and saying that he is absolutely up there.
100%.
It's like you said, when you think of those smallmouth type events, like he's one of those names that instantly comes to your head. And, he mentioned it. There's really a group of 10 to 12 guys or so that you can basically assume if you put an Elite Series tournament on a smallmouth body of water, really regardless of what it is, where it is, they're going to do well almost every time. And you and I have talked about that, with fantasy fishing and things of that nature. But Austin is most definitely one of those guys you have to put in that conversation.
Yeah, and I was looking at that and kind of thought about those guys. And I mean, I made sure I looked through every angler and was like, he's had some good smallmouth events. Let me look at his record. And then I searched up the St. Clair's, the St. Lawrence, the Champlains, the Mille Lacs, all those different places. I even counted Gussie's win at Knoxville as a smallmouth victory because he was the only one who fished for smallmouth specifically, and caught all 20 fish doing that. But when you think about that, first, second, and third at Oahe were on Mount Rushmore. I mean, Felix, Johnston, and Taku. Like it's incredible when you do know something about that species. I mean, these guys down south fish up north every year, at least 2 or 3 events. They get that experience, but to be consistent on such a hard fish to be consistent with, that's something that remains to be seen for some anglers. But yeah, that short list, I was very pleased for Felix to say, yeah, I think I belong on that list, because I figured if anyone on that list, he would be like, I hope to one day be in the list of those guys. No, he was like, yeah, I think I belong there. And I was like, dang right you do. That's why I put your name on there. Your stats speak for themselves. I think I said it correctly. 7 top 25s. And that's the 7 smallmouth events he's fished on the Elite Series, 7 top 25s. That's incredible.
Pretty impressive, no question. And, you got to be confident, obviously. I think fishing is a mad sport as far as that goes, because you have to be confident. It's like being a defensive back in football. Like if you're not confident out there, you're going to get beat. So good to see him show some of that. I definitely Glad he didn't beat around the bush and say, no. I mean, definitely glad that he went ahead and just said it. Yeah, like I'm right up there with those guys because it's true.
Yeah, and it's cool that he mentioned Santee Cooper in his style of fishing and what he learned. To hear what he's learned, I don't have forward-facing sonar on my boat. Shoot, it doesn't even matter if I did. I have not got to go fishing since Nam. So I mean, you both don't get to. If you want to fish on the weekends, don't work at Bassmaster because you won't get to fish any weekends. But no, you get to live bass fishing every day of our jobs though. So it's fun in its own right in that aspect. But yeah, to hear what he's learned about it and to know that there are some drawbacks from it, to see people still get beat who have it, by guys who maybe weren't using it, to see those maybe Red River events where you won't need it. Those types of things, Jason Christie's one of the best at it as well. And he probably turned his graph off at the Sabine when he won the event. So it's good to see there's still events we might not need it for. But man, to see that around a dock and to learn that much, it's very cool. I remember Bill Lowen, who's never really been a electronics savvy guru guy he's a shallow water guy. I think he's had it 2 different times. He caught like 5 or 6 fish in a row at the 2020 Classic at Gunnersville off the same dock. He caught like 6 casts in a row. He caught them. And then I remember at Lanier, these are places that you'd expect electronics to factor. And at Lanier, he went up under a dock and caught the biggest fish of the tournament and caught 6 others within 7 bites in a row. And one of them was big fish of the tournament. Very cool to see that, especially if you go to a dock. I mean, I love fishing docks. I grew up in the Carolinas. I live in Arkansas, where some of the lakes that I like to go to have plenty of docks. When you catch one off a dock, I'm good. I conquered that dock. That's what I want to do. When you can now learn how to catch 3 or 4 or 5 fish off a dock, that's a game changer for shallow anglers.
Yeah, and another instance that just came to my head was Corey Johnston at Pickwick. Same deal. Literally didn't even move his boat, and he got like 2 limits worth of fish off one dock. So definitely an interesting thought there, and definitely something that people can, fishermen listening to the podcast can take, because I think it is the natural instinct when you catch one off of a dock is to literally put them in the box or put them back and go to the next one. So definitely an interesting take there from Austin, and something that, we as fishermen should keep a hold of. And if you and I ever get to go fishing again, maybe we'll remember.
Yeah, exactly. I did kind of console myself when he was saying that, hey, if I pitch to a perfect pole and I present that lure perfectly, I'm like, that should have been a bite. Well, I'll just have to remember, maybe they were swimming to the other poles when I did. I'll just let it soak a little bit more, or pitch again there, because maybe they're making their rotation back. But Kyle, we've got a lot going on the next couple of weeks. We just had the Open, like we mentioned at the top of the show. The Red River's in the books. We've got the last Southern Open coming up next week. This week we have the college bracket with the 8 anglers. One of them is going to be able to go on and fish the Bassmaster Classic. Always cool. As we're knocking down these things, the first elite angler out of the Classic right now is Hunter Shryock. He just signed up to fish Hartwell. There's a lot of moving and shaking going on to try to make the last couple spots of the Classic. I think we have, we have the College Classic bracket. We have 2 Opens left. We have the 3 nation spots. We have the team champion. So we've got 7 spots left to decide the Bassmaster Classic field. Pretty cool. Our season is officially winding down. I think I get to see you this weekend, though. I think that I'll probably be able to see you. We'll be on opposite sides of the stadium, but are you indeed going to Fayetteville, Arkansas to come call the Hogs?
I'll be there. I will be there. We've had tickets for this game for, I don't know, at least a couple of months. So we'll be coming back to town. I kind of do hate that I'm missing the Classic bracket, because I've thoroughly enjoyed that tournament, and I think it's one of the most unique tournaments of the year. And you mentioned it earlier. I wanted to circle back on that. You said it seemed like a little club derby with 8 guys.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird because it has that, as if it's just like a little club get together Tuesday night jackpot, but at the end of it, somebody's going to the Bassmaster Classic. So,
and it's the more nerves than the final day of the national championship,
Yeah, terrible. But no, I hate that I'm missing that, but I am absolutely looking forward to Arkansas and Alabama this weekend for sure.
Well, you won't. I got off work. We're gonna have a guest. Brandon Polinick's gonna be Tommy Sanders' co-host. Like I had John Cruz for the Open. Brandon Polinick's gonna be the co-host with Tommy Sanders for Saturday and Sunday. You can swing on back by Little Rock and come do live with us on Monday for the finale. Me, Brandon, and you. We can knock out it, do the final day of that. But yes, I will be at the Arkansas-Alabama game with you there. We'll be in different sections, but if you're a fan of the podcast, you want to come say hey to us, we'll be wearing red on Saturdays, so just come see. Come see us, and we will we'll say hey. Kyle, appreciate you joining me for another podcast episode. I'll see you on Saturday, and as always, go Hogs.